Chapter 44 Facing Old Foes. The steady hum of the ocean beneath them gradually shifted, its gentle waves now breaking against the jagged rocks that marked the edge of an unfamiliar land. The once endless horizon was replaced by the towering cliffs of a rugged coastline, their faces carved by centuries of wind and water. Adrian and Serena stood at the helm of their ships, the Seafarer and the Ariel, their eyes fixed on the small, secluded harbor that was nestled at the base of the cliffs. The coastline was framed by dense forests that stretched high into the mountains, their dark green foliage contrasting sharply with the glowing hues of the setting sun. The evening light bathed the landscape in a warm, golden glow, painting the cliffs and trees in dramatic shades of orange and red, making the scene feel both mysterious and inviting. A palpable sense of anticipation filled the air, the calm of the sea now replaced by the unknowns that lay before them. The ships approached the harbor with steady precision, their sails gently billowing in the evening breeze. The quiet murmur of the crew preparing for docking was barely audible over the distant cry of seabirds. As the shore drew nearer, the land seemed to pulse with potential. Its isolation suggested that it had remained untouched for years, perhaps even centuries. There was a feeling that something ancient, something significant, awaited them here, hidden within the dense forest or perhaps buried beneath the rocks. With the sun dipping lower, casting longer shadows across the landscape, Adrian and Serena exchanged a look, both sensing that this place would offer more than just another destination. It was the start of a new adventure, one filled with promises of discovery and the thrill of the unknown. Adrian's voice broke the quiet tension that had settled over the crew as they neared the unfamiliar shore. His eyes remained fixed on the jagged coastline, studying the steep cliffs and the dense forests that cloaked the land. The harbor ahead appeared small and secluded, tucked away from the more traveled routes. The setting sun cast long shadows across the terrain, adding to the feeling of mystery that surrounded the place. He turned to Serena, his expression one of quiet determination. "Looks like we've arrived at our next destination," he said, his voice steady despite the sense of anticipation that hung in the air. The unknowns of the land ahead were palpable, but Adrian's experience had taught him to approach every new landfall with caution and respect. "We'll need to anchor and scout the area before proceeding," Adrian continued, his tone suggesting that their arrival would be followed by careful preparation. He motioned to the crew, giving orders to slow the ships as they closed in on the rocky shoreline. The crew immediately began to secure ropes and prepare the necessary supplies for exploration. As the Seafarer and Ariel gently rocked in the water, anchored just outside the harbor's mouth, Serena stood by Adrian's side, her gaze scanning the land ahead. There was something about this place, its isolation and untouched appearance, that felt both promising and foreboding. They knew that whatever lay beyond the cliffs, it would take time and effort to uncover its secrets, but the promise of discovery was enough to spur them on. The night would soon settle in, but tomorrow, they would begin their exploration. Serena nodded, her expression a mix of curiosity and determination. Her eyes, sharp and focused, swept over the coastline as she took in every detail. The towering cliffs that rose from the water's edge, the dense expanse of trees that seemed to shroud the land in mystery, and the distant silhouette of a narrow path that wound its way through the rugged terrain. The setting sun bathed the scene in a warm golden light, casting long shadows and making the untouched landscape appear both enchanting and untamed. She could sense that this place held secrets, perhaps old ones, waiting to be discovered. Her fingers tightened around the railing as her mind raced with possibilities. "Agreed," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "Let's see what this place has to offer." With that, she turned toward Adrian, her gaze filled with the same eager anticipation that had driven them from the very beginning of their journey. It was a shared sense of adventure that had brought them this far, and now, standing on the edge of another uncharted land, the thrill of the unknown beckoned. Serena's heart raced with the excitement of what lay ahead, but there was a quiet caution in her demeanor as well. They had learned, through their travels, the importance of patience and preparation. "We should be careful," she added, her voice soft but firm. "There's no telling what we might find here, but I'm ready to face it." With a final glance at the shore, they began to prepare for their descent into the heart of this mysterious land, knowing that whatever they encountered would be a step further into the adventure that awaited them. As the ships docked and the crew disembarked, a sense of unease slowly crept over the group. The harbor, despite its picturesque setting, had an unsettling stillness about it. The wooden piers, once sturdy and well-maintained, now sagged under the weight of neglect. The buildings that lined the shore, their faded exteriors weathered by years of salt and wind, stood in stark contrast to the vibrant port they had expected to find. Windows were cracked, doors hung ajar or missing altogether, and the air was thick with the scent of damp wood and rusted metal. It was a place suspended in time, as if the life that had once thrived here had disappeared without a trace. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their boots crunching on the dry, cracked earth as they set foot on the dock. The quiet was almost oppressive, broken only by the distant cry of seabirds circling above and the soft, rhythmic lapping of the waves against the shore. The usual hum of activity, the calls of fishermen, the creak of carts, the chatter of merchants, was absent, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The harbor, though stunning in its natural beauty, now felt like a ghost of its former self. Adrian's gaze swept over the deserted landscape, his brow furrowing with concern. Serena stood beside him, her expression guarded, sensing that something was amiss. This was no ordinary port, and it felt as if the land itself held its breath, waiting to reveal its secrets. With caution in their steps, they motioned for the crew to follow, knowing that whatever had led to the harbor's abandonment was a mystery they would soon have to face. Adrian and Serena led a small group of their crew through the village, their footsteps echoing in the empty streets. The houses, once welcoming homes, now stood in quiet disrepair, with shutters half closed and doorways left wide open, as though abandoned in haste. Many of the shops that once lined the cobbled paths were boarded up, their windows covered with time-worn planks of wood, leaving only faint memories of bustling trade. The occasional gust of wind stirred the dry leaves that had gathered in the corners, and the distant sound of creaking wood made the silence feel even more profound. Despite the emptiness, there was an undeniable sense that this place had once been alive with activity, now stilled by some unseen force. As they walked deeper into the village, they reached the central square, where a few tattered banners fluttered weakly in the breeze, their bright colors faded and frayed. The once proud symbols that had hung in celebration now hung as quiet remnants of a past long gone. The stone fountain in the middle of the square, though cracked, still held water, its surface rippling gently as the wind passed over it. The square, which should have been filled with the hustle and bustle of villagers, now stood in ghostly stillness. It was a hauntingly beautiful place, a town that seemed to be frozen in time, its former vibrancy a mere echo of what it had once been. The group paused for a moment, sensing the weight of the village's silence, and exchanged uneasy glances. There was a story here, one they were about to uncover. As they ventured deeper into the village, the eerie quiet that had settled over them was suddenly shattered by a sharp, echoing clang that rang through the empty streets. The sound was so sudden and out of place that it sent a chill through the air, making the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Adrian's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword, drawing it with a practiced motion as his eyes darted across the village, searching for any sign of movement in the shadowed alleyways and abandoned homes. His mind raced, calculating potential threats and preparing for the worst. The clang had come from somewhere nearby, and he knew it was no accident. Serena, ever vigilant, immediately reacted as well, her posture shifting into one of alert readiness. Her senses, sharpened by years of navigating both the sea and unknown lands, heightened at the sound. She could feel the tension in the air, the subtle shift that signaled something, or someone, was near. The two stood motionless for a moment, their eyes scanning the surroundings, hearts racing in anticipation. The silence that followed felt heavier now, as if the village itself was holding its breath. Every creak of the wind against the old wooden structures, every rustling of the dry leaves underfoot seemed amplified in the stillness. Serena's eyes narrowed as she focused on the slightest movements in the distance, while Adrian's grip on his sword tightened. They had faced many unknowns in their travels, but something about the atmosphere here was different, charged with a presence that neither of them could yet pinpoint. Their thoughts were in sync as they prepared for whatever threat might emerge from the shadows, knowing that they couldn't afford to be caught off guard. From the shadowed recesses of a crumbling building, figures slowly emerged, their silhouettes stark against the dimming light. As they stepped into the open, recognition hit Adrian like a wave. The group before them was no stranger. It was a collection of old adversaries, pirates who had once been a thorn in their side. The leader of the group, Captain Soren, stood at the forefront, his weathered face lined with the marks of years spent navigating treacherous waters. His once proud coat, now frayed and faded, flapped in the wind like a tattered banner of defiance. His eyes locked onto Adrian's, sharp with the bitterness of old grudges, and a smug grin played across his face as if the confrontation was something he had been eagerly anticipating. Behind Captain Soren stood his loyal crew, each member hardened by time, battle, and betrayal. Their postures were tense, ready for a fight or perhaps something more sinister. The tension in the air thickened as the pirates' eyes swept over Serena and Adrian, calculating their every move. Some bore weapons, while others simply glared, the shared animosity between them palpable. The quiet of the abandoned village seemed to echo with the weight of their presence, a reminder of the conflicts of the past. Adrian's grip on his sword tightened, and Serena stood poised beside him, her gaze unwavering as she sized up the group. This was a confrontation they had not expected, but one they would have to face head-on, whether they were ready for it or not. "Well, well," Captain Soren sneered, his voice dripping with malice as he took a step forward, his boots crunching against the gravel. The faint glow of the setting sun cast long shadows across his face, highlighting the bitterness etched into his features. His eyes glinted with a mix of amusement and disdain as they locked onto Adrian and Serena. "If it isn't Adrian Blackwood and Serena! I must say, I'm surprised to see you here. What brings you to our little corner of the world?" His words hung in the air like a challenge, laced with a taunting edge that seemed to carry the weight of old grudges. The smugness in his expression suggested that whatever they had come to do, he was certain it would not end well for them. Soren's crew stood behind him, their eyes flicking from one to the other, their stance defensive, ready to back their captain at a moment's notice. The quiet hum of the village seemed to hold its breath as the tension between the two groups thickened. Adrian's jaw tightened, and he could feel the familiar spark of anger rise within him, but he kept his composure, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his sword. Serena, too, held her ground, her posture steady and her eyes unwavering as she studied Soren, aware of the dangerous nature of their reunion. This was no coincidence. Soren and his crew had a history with them, one filled with treachery and betrayal, and it was clear that their paths had crossed once again, for better or worse. Adrian's grip tightened around the hilt of his sword, his fingers steady despite the surge of anger that threatened to bubble up. His eyes narrowed as he focused on Soren, every muscle in his body coiled with restrained energy. "We're not here to cause trouble," Adrian said, his voice low and controlled, though the tension in his tone betrayed his frustration. "We're on a mission to explore and map new territories." He stepped forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. "But it seems you've made that impossible." The words were sharp, each syllable laced with a quiet warning. It was clear that the presence of Soren and his crew had disrupted their plans, and Adrian was not about to let their dangerous past sour what should have been an opportunity for discovery. The silence that followed hung heavily in the air, the weight of their words sinking in. Serena remained still beside Adrian, her eyes scanning the group of pirates with a mixture of caution and readiness. The remnants of their previous encounters with Soren and his crew were never far from her mind, and she could sense the volatility that now hung between them. Soren's sneer widened into a grin, but there was no humor in it, only the cold assurance of someone who knew how to provoke, how to manipulate a situation for his own benefit. The situation was quickly spiraling towards something neither side could control, and as the moments stretched on, Adrian could feel the tension between them reaching its breaking point. The uneasy quiet of the village now felt like the calm before a storm, and they both knew that any misstep could trigger an unpredictable conflict. Soren chuckled darkly, the sound reverberating through the empty streets like a warning bell. His eyes gleamed with a dangerous light, and his grin only deepened, twisted by years of bitterness and greed. "Impossible?" he repeated, his voice rising with mock incredulity. "We've been waiting for an opportunity like this. This place is ours." He gestured widely to the desolate village, as if the crumbling buildings and empty streets were a testament to his claim. "And we don't take kindly to uninvited guests." His tone was heavy with malice, each word dripping with disdain. The menace in his voice hung in the air, thick and palpable, as though the very atmosphere had become charged with the tension between them. Behind him, his crew shifted restlessly, eyes narrowing as they sized up Adrian and Serena, every hand twitching near a weapon. The air seemed to grow thicker, as if the quiet village itself was holding its breath, waiting for the first move to be made. Adrian could feel the weight of Soren's words settling over him, an all too familiar challenge that stirred a mix of annoyance and readiness in his gut. He knew Soren's type: proud, territorial, and quick to resort to violence when things didn't go his way. Yet there was something different this time, something about the way Soren stood, his posture rigid with a sense of ownership. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about control. And Adrian wasn't about to let that slip through his fingers. Serena stepped forward, her presence commanding and unwavering as she locked eyes with Soren. The soft, determined steel in her voice cut through the tension like a blade, and the air seemed to shift with her words. "We don't want any conflict," she said, her gaze unflinching as she assessed the pirate captain and his crew. There was a calm confidence in her stance, her hands resting loosely at her sides, yet there was a quiet power radiating from her. "We're here to uncover the mysteries of this land and move on. That's all." Her voice remained steady, though there was an undeniable edge to it, an unspoken promise that they would not be easily intimidated or driven from their course. She could feel Adrian's presence behind her, a steady reminder that they were a team, ready to face whatever came their way. Her words hung in the air, challenging the pirates to reconsider their stance. She wasn't looking for a fight, but she wasn't going to back down either. Serena's eyes briefly flickered toward the weathered buildings surrounding them, the abandoned village that seemed to have a hidden history. She could sense something off about this place, a lingering presence that Soren and his crew had made their own, perhaps in ways that weren't entirely above board. "If you have a problem with that, we can resolve it without unnecessary violence," she added, her voice firm, but not without the hint of diplomacy. The implication was clear: they were prepared to leave peacefully, but they wouldn't be threatened into retreat. Serena stood her ground, her resolve unwavering in the face of Soren's aggression. Soren's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light, his smile stretching into something cruel and calculating. The words dripped from his lips like venom, each one laced with malice. "Oh, I'm sure you'd like that," he sneered, taking a slow step toward them, his boots crunching against the cracked cobblestones. There was an air of satisfaction in his posture, as if he had been waiting for this very moment for a long time. His crew stirred behind him, their faces twisted in anticipation, sensing that the tension was about to break. "But you see," Soren continued, his voice lowering to a menacing growl, "we've been waiting for the right moment to settle old scores." His fingers idly traced the hilt of his cutlass, a gesture that spoke of years spent in conflict and unresolved bitterness. His eyes never left Adrian and Serena as he spoke, the fire of revenge igniting in his gaze. "You've meddled in our affairs before," he said, the words laced with accusation. "And now it's time for payback." His voice was a low threat, the promise of a fight thick in the air. The wind seemed to carry the weight of his words, and the once picturesque village now felt like a trap closing in around them. Serena's senses flared, every muscle in her body tense, ready for action, but her mind raced, calculating the best way to handle the situation. Soren's bitterness was a well-worn weapon, but it was one they would have to face head-on if they wanted to move forward with their mission. The pirates were not going to let them leave easily, and it seemed the past was about to catch up with them in the worst way possible. Before Adrian or Serena could even draw a breath, Soren's crew surged forward, weapons flashing in the dim light of the village square. The air crackled with the promise of violence as the pirates closed in around them, their eyes filled with malicious intent. Blades gleamed in the fading sunlight, and the sound of metal scraping against metal rang out, heightening the tension in the already oppressive atmosphere. Adrian's hand instinctively reached for the hilt of his sword, his body going on alert as his mind shifted into combat mode. Beside him, Serena's posture was as unyielding as ever, her eyes cold with determination as she prepared for the battle ahead. Without a word, they sprang into action, the quiet grace of their movements belying the intensity of the skirmish that was about to unfold. As the first clash of steel echoed through the square, Adrian and Serena fought with a synchrony that spoke of years spent honing their skills and learning to trust each other implicitly. Adrian's sword flashed in the air with calculated precision, his strikes powerful and swift, each one finding its mark with lethal accuracy. Beside him, Serena was a whirlwind of motion, her every movement fluid yet forceful as she parried and struck with lethal intent. Together, they were a seamless force, a blur of strength and grace as they danced through the chaos, outmaneuvering the pirates with ease. Their bond was evident in the way they covered each other's backs, anticipating one another's actions as though they were a single entity. The battle raged around them, but their focus never wavered. Every swing of their blades, every step they took, was a reflection of their unshakable commitment to their mission and the fight ahead. Amidst the chaotic clash of steel and the frantic shouts of battle, Serena's sharp eyes caught sight of a group of villagers standing at the edge of the square. They were huddled together, their faces pale and drawn with fear, watching the conflict unfold before them. It was clear they were helpless, trapped between the pirates and their own unwillingness to take a stand. Their expressions were filled with anxiety, their bodies tense as if bracing for further violence. Serena's heart clenched at the sight of the innocent lives affected by this brutal confrontation, and the realization struck her like a cold wave. Soren's crew had taken control of this once thriving village, turning it into a base of operations for their nefarious plans. The villagers, it seemed, were caught in the crossfire, prisoners in their own home, forced to witness the havoc Soren had wrought. As she parried a vicious strike from one of the pirates, Serena's thoughts raced. It was no longer just about defeating Soren's crew, it was about liberating these people from the grip of terror they'd been living under. Her gaze flickered back to the villagers, who were standing motionless, unsure whether to flee or try to intervene. A sense of urgency surged through her, and she knew that as much as she had to focus on the immediate danger of the fight, she had to find a way to free these people from the tyranny Soren had imposed. The realization fueled her determination, her resolve hardening with the knowledge that this battle wasn't just for survival. It was for the freedom of those who had been oppressed under Soren's rule. With a final, decisive clash, Adrian and Serena brought the last of their adversaries to the ground, their swords flashing in a coordinated display of precision and strength. The remaining pirates, including Captain Soren, had managed to break free during the chaos, slipping into the dense woods that surrounded the village with a mixture of rage and cunning. Adrian's chest heaved with the exertion of the battle, but his eyes remained sharp, scanning the immediate area for any sign of further danger. His grip on his sword relaxed, though his focus never wavered. The sounds of the skirmish faded, leaving only the rhythmic thud of his heartbeat in his ears as he surveyed the scene. The village square lay in disarray, littered with the fallen and the echoes of conflict still hanging in the air. As Adrian sheathed his sword, he took in the faces of the villagers, now cautiously stepping forward, their fear giving way to a mixture of relief and uncertainty. The fight had been hard fought, but the victory was theirs. His gaze shifted to Serena, her eyes locked on the tree-line where Soren and his crew had disappeared, the unspoken understanding between them clear. They had won this battle, but the war, if it could be called that, was far from over. They would need to find Soren, end his control over the village, and ensure that the people could live in peace once more. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on Adrian, but he knew that together, they could face whatever came next. Serena's voice cut through the lingering tension in the air, her words sharp and filled with determination. Her eyes scanned the village around them, noting the broken windows and the remnants of a once thriving community now overshadowed by Soren's influence. "We need to find out more about their operations here," she continued, her tone taut with urgency. The weight of their mission settled heavily on her shoulders as she glanced at Adrian. This place wasn't just a forgotten village, it was a stronghold, and Soren's presence here could mean more trouble than they had initially anticipated. The remnants of the skirmish still lingered in the air, but Serena knew that they couldn't afford to focus on personal vendettas. This was bigger than their past encounters with Soren. Adrian met her gaze, his expression hardening as the implications of her words sank in. He could feel the pull of the unfinished business, the lingering desire for retribution, but Serena was right. Their mission now was not about seeking vengeance. It was about understanding what had brought Soren and his crew to this place and uncovering the true nature of their operation. Agreed, he said, his voice low but resolute. We need to find out what they've been doing here, what they've been hiding. His grip tightened on the hilt of his sword, not out of readiness for a fight, but in a quiet promise that whatever they discovered, they would face it together. There was no time to waste. They had a new challenge to unravel, and they were determined to get to the bottom of it. Adrian's expression was set, his resolve hardening as he glanced back toward the village. The tension from the skirmish still lingered in the air, but his focus was now on the bigger picture. He knew that to move forward, they needed to understand the full scope of what they were up against. Agreed, he said, his voice steady and commanding. We'll gather information from the villagers, learn what they know about Soren's operation, and make sure we're prepared for whatever comes next. He looked to Serena, his trust in her unwavering, knowing that together, they could navigate whatever dangers lay ahead. As they surveyed the surroundings, Adrian could sense the unease still radiating from the villagers, many of whom had likely lived under the constant threat of Soren's crew for far too long. It wasn't just about gathering information, it was about rebuilding trust and gaining the cooperation of those who had been oppressed. Adrian's mind was already working on a plan to approach them with care, knowing that every word spoken could either push them further into fear or pull them into an alliance. We need to be careful, he added, his gaze steady on Serena. This isn't just about us, it's about everyone here. Adrian and Serena moved cautiously toward the villagers, their expressions softening as they neared those who had remained hidden during the skirmish. The fear in the villagers' eyes was palpable, but Adrian's calm demeanor and Serena's steady presence seemed to offer a sense of reassurance. As they drew closer, Serena spoke gently, her voice carrying a note of empathy. We're here to help, she said, her eyes scanning the group. You're safe now, but we need to understand what's been happening here. Adrian nodded in agreement, his posture open and unthreatening, as they encouraged the villagers to share their experiences and fears. Slowly, the tension in the air began to ease as the villagers began to speak. What they learned revealed a grim picture of life under Soren's rule. The villagers explained how Soren and his crew had taken control of the area, turning the once thriving port into a place of exploitation and fear. They had seized valuable resources, enforcing their will with violence and intimidation. Any resistance had been swiftly crushed, leaving the villagers cowering in silence, unable to fight back. Some spoke of loved ones taken as prisoners, while others whispered of secret deals made in the dark corners of the village. The full scale of the crew's operations was still unclear, but it was evident that the villagers had lived in a constant state of fear. As Adrian and Serena listened intently, a growing determination settled within them. This wasn't just about reclaiming the land, it was about restoring justice to those who had been silenced for far too long. With the gravity of the villagers' words weighing heavily on them, Adrian and Serena exchanged a look of understanding. What had initially seemed like a simple exploration mission had now evolved into something far more complex. The stakes had been raised, and their journey was no longer just about uncovering new lands and charting unknown territories. It was about freeing these people from the clutches of Soren's reign of terror. As the weight of their newfound responsibility settled over them, both felt the shift in their purpose. The quiet anticipation of adventure was now replaced with a sense of urgency and duty. The exploration they had envisioned was suddenly intertwined with the harsh realities of resistance and liberation. Serena's resolve hardened as she thought about the families who had been oppressed and the lives that had been stolen. They couldn't leave this village, not now. Their mission had grown to encompass more than just discovering the world. It was about restoring balance and justice where it had been upended. Adrian, too, felt the fire of determination in his chest. He had always fought for freedom and for what was right, But now he saw the tangible consequences of Soren's cruelty. They had a new role to play, one that required not only their strength but their compassion and leadership. Together, they were no longer just adventurers, they were protectors, and the battle ahead would test everything they had learned along their journey. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the hills, the village seemed to settle into an eerie calm, but the tension in the air was palpable. Adrian and Serena gathered their crew around a makeshift campfire in the center of the village, their faces illuminated by the flickering light. The air was thick with the weight of their next steps. They had come here with one mission in mind, to explore and uncover new lands, but now their purpose had changed. Soren and his crew had brought darkness and fear to the people, and they couldn't walk away. The plans they had drawn up earlier that day were now irrelevant. Instead, they had to adapt, strategize, and prepare for the conflict ahead. Each crew member, hardened by past battles, listened intently as Adrian outlined their next moves, while Serena's steady presence reminded them of the importance of their cause. There was no turning back now, only forward. Though the night was still, the weight of what lay ahead loomed large over them. As the moon rose high, casting long shadows over the village, their resolve solidified. They would not let Soren's cruelty continue unchecked. They would protect these people, uncover the secrets behind Soren's operations, and dismantle his control over the area. The crew, once excited about the adventures of exploration, now stood united in their shared mission to bring justice. With renewed determination, Adrian and Serena knew that this battle would not only test their strength and skills but also their hearts. Their journey had taken an unexpected turn, and though the path ahead was uncertain, they would face it together, unyielding in their pursuit of what was right. As the night deepened, Adrian and Serena stood side by side, the weight of their new mission settling in. The fire crackled before them, casting flickering shadows across their faces as they discussed their next steps. They had come here seeking adventure and the thrill of exploring unknown lands, but now, their purpose had shifted. The faces of the villagers, fearful yet hopeful, reminded them of the responsibility they had taken on. The challenges they had already overcome, both together and individually, had forged an unbreakable bond between them. That bond, strengthened through countless battles, would be their anchor in the coming days. Despite the weight of the situation, they stood firm, knowing that they had the strength and resolve to face whatever dangers awaited them. The unknown had always been an allure, but now it was a battlefield where they would fight not just for themselves, but for those who could not fight for themselves. The journey that had begun with excitement and curiosity had taken a darker turn, but Adrian and Serena were no strangers to adversity. Their past had shaped them into warriors, leaders, and protectors, and they would use everything they had learned to navigate this new chapter. They had faced old enemies before, and though the stakes were higher now, they knew they had the power to overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. The memory of their shared victories, each one a testament to their strength and unity, filled them with quiet confidence. With their crew ready to stand beside them, and the villagers' lives now intertwined with their mission, they were no longer just explorers. They were fighters, determined to confront the shadows of their past and secure a future where peace could take root once more. Chapter 45: A Test of Loyalty. The village, once again quiet after the chaos of the earlier battle, seemed to hold its breath in a tense calm. The flickering of lanterns in the windows and the hushed murmurs of the villagers were the only sounds that broke the stillness of the evening. Adrian and Serena had worked tirelessly throughout the day, offering whatever protection they could to the frightened villagers. They had shared what little supplies they could spare, helped tend to the wounded, and reassured those whose lives had been upended by the sudden violence. Despite their best efforts, the weight of the day's events still hung heavy in the air, the villagers' faces a mix of gratitude and lingering fear. The threat of Captain Soren's return still loomed large over them all, and Adrian and Serena couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that this small victory had only postponed the inevitable. Their mission, which had seemed so clear when they first set sail, now felt muddied by the unexpected turn of events. As the night deepened, the uncertainty about their future became more palpable. The bond between Adrian and Serena, forged through countless trials, had been tested once again. The looming danger of Soren's crew cast a shadow over their once exhilarating sense of adventure, bringing them back to the harsh reality of their journey. There was an unspoken tension between them now, an awareness that their mission had become more complicated than either of them had anticipated. Yet even in the midst of this uncertainty, their connection remained strong. It was a bond that had withstood far more than this, and though the road ahead was fraught with peril, Adrian and Serena knew they could face whatever came next, as long as they faced it together. The path forward was unclear, but one thing was certain: they would not let Soren's shadow overtake their resolve. As dusk settled over the village, casting long shadows across the land, Adrian and Serena made their way back to their ships, their bodies weary from the day's exertions. The night air was cool and sharp, offering a welcome contrast to the heat of the earlier battle. Above them, the sky stretched out in a blanket of stars, their glittering light a sharp reminder of the vastness of the world beyond their immediate troubles. The peaceful serenity of the evening stood in stark contrast to the chaos and conflict they had faced, and for a moment, both Adrian and Serena stood in silence, taking in the stillness before stepping aboard their respective vessels. It was a moment of quiet reflection, the weight of the day's events settling into their bones as they braced for whatever lay ahead. Once aboard the Ariel, the mood shifted from the calm of the night to a heavy stillness. The main cabin was dimly lit by the flickering glow of a lantern, casting long shadows on the walls. Serena and Adrian stood at the helm, their eyes meeting across the cabin, both understanding the unspoken gravity of the situation. The air in the room was thick with the weight of recent conflicts, Soren's reappearance, the villagers' suffering, and the uncertainty of their mission. There was no denying that their journey had taken an unexpected turn, and despite the exhaustion that clung to them, either of them felt like they could rest just yet. The path forward was unclear, but in that moment, they both understood that they had to face it together, with resolve and determination. The days ahead would be fraught with challenges, but they were no strangers to adversity. Adrian poured 2 glasses of wine, the rich red liquid swirling in the dim light of the cabin as he handed one to Serena. The soft clink of the glasses was the only sound breaking the heavy silence between them. He met her gaze, his expression steady despite the exhaustion that weighed on both of them. "We need to stay focused," he said, his voice calm but firm, carrying the weight of the responsibility they now shared. The tension that had lingered throughout the day hadn't dissipated, and he could feel the strain of their recent battles still settling in his bones. Yet, he knew that they couldn't afford to let fatigue cloud their judgment. The threat of Soren and his crew still loomed large, and as much as he longed for a moment of peace, he understood that their mission was far from over. Serena accepted the glass, her fingers brushing his for a brief moment before she took a sip. She watched Adrian carefully, her mind already shifting back to their plans. "Soren won't stop," she replied quietly, her voice edged with both determination and the quiet fear that had been growing in her chest since their confrontation. She could see the toll their journey had taken on him, but she also knew that his resolve remained unbroken. As much as they had accomplished, there were still many battles ahead. Their journey had transformed from a mission of exploration into something far more personal, and the stakes were now higher than ever. They needed to be prepared, not just for the next encounter with Soren, but for the challenges they would face as they continued their fight to protect the people who depended on them. The quiet of the night around them only emphasized the urgency of the task at hand, but for the moment, they shared a quiet understanding, knowing that no matter what came next, they would face it side by side. Serena took a sip of the wine, the rich taste lingering on her tongue as her thoughts drifted. She stared out the window of the cabin, her gaze distant, as if she were searching for answers in the dark expanse of the ocean beyond. Her mind raced with the implications of their recent discoveries. "I agree," she murmured softly, turning back to Adrian, her expression pensive. "But the situation is more complicated than we initially thought." Her voice carried the weight of the realization that what they had believed to be a simple obstacle in their journey had quickly turned into something far more dangerous. The conflict with Soren was only the surface, and beneath it, she sensed a deeper, more insidious threat lurking. This wasn't just about pirates or territorial disputes. It was something tied to the land, to the people, and perhaps even to forces either of them fully understood. Her brow furrowed slightly as she set the glass down on the table, her fingers tracing the rim absently. Soren's presence here is tied to something larger, she continued, her voice growing more intense with the gravity of the situation. It's affecting more than just our mission. She paused, collecting her thoughts before meeting Adrian's eyes. She could see the same concern mirrored in his gaze, the understanding that they had crossed a threshold they could never go back from. The village, Soren's crew, and the strange unease that had settled over them all pointed to a much larger conspiracy at play. Their journey had shifted, and with it, the stakes. This was no longer just about exploring uncharted territories. It was about uncovering the truth behind Soren's actions and the sinister forces at work in the shadows. Serena felt a knot of unease tighten in her chest, but she knew one thing for certain: whatever lay ahead, they would have to face it together. Adrian nodded slowly, his eyes drifting to the map spread out across the table, though his mind was far from the coordinates and routes marked on it. The weight of Serena's words lingered in the air between them, thick with the understanding that the situation had grown far more intricate than they had imagined. "We need to find out what that something is," he said, his voice calm but filled with a quiet intensity. His fingers traced the edge of the map, as if seeking answers in its intricate details. The mysterious link between Soren's crew and the village's troubles gnawed at him, the unspoken threat that something far greater was at play. They could no longer view their mission as just a journey of exploration. It had morphed into something more urgent, a battle against hidden forces. Adrian knew that uncovering the truth was paramount, but he also understood that this new challenge required more than just physical strength. It required focus, determination, and careful navigation of the uncertainties ahead. But as the weight of their mission pressed down on him, Adrian also recognized the strain it was putting on their bond. The flickering lantern light cast shadows across their faces as he met Serena's eyes, his expression softening, yet resolute. "But we also need to ensure that we don't let this conflict tear us apart," he added, his words steady but laced with an underlying concern. The battles they had already faced, both external and internal, had tested them in ways they hadn't anticipated. The tension between them and Soren's crew was palpable, and the more they learned about the larger threat, the more they felt the pressure mounting on them, not just as allies in a mission, but as partners. Adrian understood the importance of staying unified. The strength of their relationship, forged through years of trials and victories, was the very foundation that would carry them through the trials ahead. Whatever dangers they faced, he knew they would overcome them together, but only if they remained united, focused, and unwavering in their trust in each other. As they spoke, the quiet conversation between Adrian and Serena was interrupted by the soft creak of the cabin door. Both of them turned their heads in unison, eyes narrowing slightly in surprise. The figure that entered was Elias, one of their trusted crew members, but his usually confident demeanor was replaced by an unsettling pallor. His eyes darted around the room before settling on them, his expression tense, as if he were carrying a heavy burden. The warmth of the cabin, filled with the lingering scent of wine and the faint aroma of wood smoke, seemed to contrast sharply with the unease radiating from him. Elias paused just inside the doorway, glancing behind him as if ensuring no one else was following. The quietness in the room thickened, and Adrian's gaze sharpened, sensing that something was amiss. Elias shifted uncomfortably on his feet, his hands fidgeting at his sides. He took a step closer, his voice low and tight as he spoke. "Captain Serena, I've just come from the village." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of something troubling. The unease in his eyes was impossible to miss, and it was clear that whatever news he carried was not good. Serena's brow furrowed as she sat up straighter, instinctively sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Adrian's hand rested on the hilt of his sword, a reflex born of countless encounters with danger. Elias swallowed hard before continuing, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something happening, something we didn't expect. Soren's crew isn't the only threat lurking here." The tension in the room thickened, and both Adrian and Serena exchanged a brief, but meaningful glance. This was no ordinary problem, and it was clear that their journey was about to take another, more perilous turn. Elias's words hung in the air like a dark cloud, heavy with the threat they carried. Adrian's grip tightened on the arm of his chair, and Serena's gaze grew sharp as they processed the gravity of what Elias had just said. The Heartstone, a legendary artifact they had come to believe was integral to their mission, was now at the center of a dangerous standoff. The thought of handing it over felt like a betrayal, not just to their cause, but to the people they had sworn to protect. Elias shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flickering with uncertainty, as though unsure of how Adrian would react to the unexpected development. "They know about the Heartstone?" Adrian's voice was steady, but a flicker of concern passed through his expression. "How could they possibly know about it, and why would they want it?" Serena, her eyes narrowed, added, "This isn't just about the stone. If Soren's allies are making threats, they must have their own reasons for wanting it." Adrian stood, his movements slow and deliberate as he paced toward the window, staring out at the darkened horizon. His thoughts raced as he weighed the implications of the threat. "If they want the Heartstone, they'll stop at nothing to get it," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The distant glow of the moon reflected off the calm water, but within, Adrian felt a storm brewing. He turned back to face Elias, his expression grim. "We can't let fear dictate our actions. We fought too hard, and we won't back down now." Serena joined him at the window, her hand resting on his arm in silent solidarity. The message wasn't just a warning, it was a challenge, a direct strike against everything they had worked for. And with it, the stakes of their mission had just been raised to an entirely new level. Their next move would not only determine the fate of the village, but perhaps the future of their entire journey. Serena's voice trembled with disbelief as she absorbed the weight of Elias's words. The Heartstone was meant to be a secret, an artifact of immense power that only a few trusted individuals knew about. It had been the key to their mission, the one thing they believed would grant them the ability to uncover the mysteries they sought. The realization that their enemies were aware of its existence was both unsettling and dangerous. Her gaze flickered to Adrian, searching for reassurance, but his expression mirrored her unease. He too was grappling with the magnitude of the situation. The Heartstone had always been an integral part of their journey, and now, its discovery by Soren's allies threatened to turn everything upside down. "How could they have found out?" Serena muttered under her breath, her mind racing through possible answers. Adrian's jaw tightened as he took a step closer to her, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword in reflex. "This changes everything," he said, his voice low and filled with the weight of their new reality. "They wouldn't threaten the village unless they were serious about taking it. And if they know about the Heartstone, they know how powerful it is." Serena could feel the tension building between them, the very air thick with the sense of impending conflict. Their mission, once driven by the desire to explore and map new territories, had now become a battle to protect something far more valuable than they'd initially realized. The Heartstone wasn't just an object, it was the key to their future, and they couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. "We need to figure out why they want it, and fast," Serena said, her voice firm with resolve, as she locked eyes with Adrian. The fight ahead was no longer just about survival. It was about ensuring that the Heartstone remained safe, and that their journey could continue without being overshadowed by the looming threat. Elias's words hung in the air, thick with the weight of the threat they now faced. The urgency in his voice was undeniable, and it became clear that Soren's crew was no longer interested in idle threats. They were willing to do whatever it took to get their hands on the Heartstone. Adrian and Serena exchanged a glance, both of them understanding the gravity of the situation. The Heartstone had been a symbol of their hopes and aspirations, the key to unlocking the mysteries they sought to uncover, and now it was a target. Every step they had taken in their journey seemed to lead to this point, a confrontation that was no longer just about exploration but about defending something much more powerful. "They must have spies," Adrian muttered, his mind already turning over the possibilities of how Soren's crew could have learned so much about the Heartstone's significance. The very idea that their enemies knew what it could do, and were willing to escalate their tactics, made the stakes even higher. Serena's grip tightened around her glass of wine as the realization set in. "We can't let them have it," she said, her voice steady but laced with an edge of determination. The Heartstone had been entrusted to them, and it was their duty to protect it at all costs. Elias's news only fueled the fire that had been burning in their chests since they first learned of the artifact's power. If Soren's crew succeeded in taking it, they would have access to untold power that could easily turn the tides in their favor, power that could destroy everything Adrian and Serena had worked for. "We need to make sure no one else knows its true value," Serena added, her thoughts already racing ahead. The message was clear: surrender it or face destruction. The time for negotiations had passed. Now they would have to prepare for a fight, not just to protect the village, but to protect the Heartstone itself. Adrian's voice was filled with a steely resolve as he set down his glass, the weight of his words settling in the cabin. The Heartstone wasn't just a powerful artifact, it represented everything they had fought for: the fragile balance of the world, the future of their mission, and the sacrifices they had made to get this far. If Soren's crew succeeded in taking it, it wouldn't just be a loss of a valuable object. It would undo everything they had worked toward, the very foundation of their quest. Adrian's mind raced, considering their next move. They couldn't afford to be reckless, but they also couldn't back down now. This wasn't just about protecting the Heartstone, it was about protecting the future they believed in, the one that they knew was worth fighting for. Serena, sensing the intensity of Adrian's determination, met his gaze with equal steadfastness. "We've come too far to let Soren destroy everything," she said, her tone resolute. They had seen too much, fought too hard, and lost too much to let it all be undone by a single enemy. The balance they had sought to restore was precarious, and the Heartstone was its key. They couldn't allow anyone to use its power for selfish gain or destructive purposes. Serena's hand clenched into a fist as she considered their options. If Soren thought he could intimidate them into surrendering, he was gravely mistaken. They had made it this far by sticking together, relying on each other's strength, and they weren't about to let that be taken away now. The mission, their cause, and the people they had vowed to protect all depended on what came next, and Adrian and Serena were prepared to do whatever it took to ensure the Heartstone stayed out of enemy hands. Serena's gaze drifted toward the window, where the last light of the setting sun painted the horizon in soft hues of orange and pink. The weight of her thoughts pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had always believed in standing firm, in fighting for what was right, but the villagers' safety was now a major concern. If they refused to hand over the Heartstone, the consequences could be catastrophic. Soren's crew had already shown how far they were willing to go to claim the artifact, and Serena couldn't ignore the possibility that innocent lives could be caught in the crossfire. Their mission had always been about balance and protection, but now it felt like they were balancing on the edge of a knife, with no easy choices ahead. She turned back to Adrian, the uncertainty clear in her eyes. They couldn't ignore the villagers' fear and the risks they faced, but giving in to Soren's demands would come at a cost too great to ignore. Adrian could see the conflict in Serena's eyes, the struggle between duty and compassion. He knew that every decision they made now would shape the future, not just for their journey but for the people they had sworn to protect. The Heartstone was too vital to their mission to give up, yet Serena was right. They couldn't put the villagers at risk. His mind worked quickly, weighing their options. Would surrendering the stone be a temporary solution, or would it only embolden Soren's crew? And if they fought, would the village pay the price for their defiance? Adrian stepped closer to Serena, his voice steady despite the turbulence inside him. "We won't let them take the stone, but we'll find a way to protect the village too," he said, the resolve returning to his words. He had always believed in their ability to overcome whatever obstacles lay in their path, and this time, he wasn't about to let Soren's threat tear them apart. They would need to be strategic, careful, but above all, they would remain united, protecting both the Heartstone and the people they had come to care for. The weight of the decision felt like an anchor around their hearts, its heaviness pressing down with every passing moment. On one hand, the Heartstone was the key to everything they had worked for, their mission, the balance they had fought to restore, and the future they hoped to build. Without it, the entire foundation of their purpose could crumble, leaving them vulnerable to Soren's ambitions. But on the other hand, The villagers had placed their trust in them, and they had seen the fear in their eyes. These people had endured enough hardship under Soren's rule, and now, Adrian and Serena had become their last line of defense. If they chose the Heartstone, they risked condemning the villagers to further violence and oppression. If they chose the villagers, the Heartstone, along with everything it represented, could be lost. The decision felt impossible, the cost of either path too high. Serena found herself staring into the dimming horizon, her mind racing through every possibility, each one leading to its own set of consequences. The lives of the villagers were in their hands, but so was the balance of the world they had sworn to protect. She had always known their mission was dangerous, but this felt different. This was not just about them anymore. This was about the countless lives that would be affected by whatever choice they made. Adrian's steady presence beside her was the only thing grounding her in the midst of the turmoil. Together, they had faced countless challenges, but this was the moment that would define the course of their journey. They needed to find a way to walk the line between duty and compassion, to protect both the artifact and the people who had become so much more than strangers to them. Whatever decision they made, it would shape the future in ways they could not yet imagine. As the silence stretched between them, the weight of their dilemma became all the more apparent. Adrian and Serena had always been partners, bound by a shared mission and an unspoken trust that had carried them through countless trials. Yet now, for the first time, they found themselves standing at odds, each torn between their loyalty to the Heartstone and their commitment to the villagers. Their bond was strong, but the choices before them were complex, and no matter which path they chose, there would be sacrifices. The tension that lingered in the air was palpable, as if the very essence of their alliance was being tested in ways they hadn't anticipated. They had faced external threats before, but now, the most formidable challenge came from within, a deep, gut-wrenching uncertainty about what was truly right and what they had to do to ensure the greater good. The stakes had never been so high. Every word they spoke seemed to carry the weight of an entire world, each decision a potential turning point that would echo long after it was made. The fate of the villagers, the Heartstone, and their mission hung in the balance, and with it, their future together. They had always known that their journey would be dangerous, but this was different. This was a test of their values, of the very foundation of their partnership. As they stood side by side, each lost in their own thoughts, they knew that whatever decision they reached would define not just their mission, but who they were as individuals and as allies. The consequences would ripple through every corner of their world, and neither of them could predict what the cost would ultimately be. The words hung heavily in the air, and for a moment, the tension in the cabin was suffocating. Serena's gaze drifted towards the map spread out on the table, her fingers tracing the lines that marked their journey and the many places they had yet to explore. It felt as though every step they had taken had led them to this moment, this impossible decision. The Heartstone had become not just a symbol of their mission, but a key to the fragile balance of the world they were trying to protect. Protecting it was crucial, but so was the safety of the villagers, who had entrusted them with their lives. Serena's mind raced, weighing the lives of innocent people against the broader consequences of losing the artifact to Soren's crew. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her chest, a feeling she had never quite encountered before. Every possible outcome felt like a risk, and no matter what they chose, someone would suffer. Adrian's expression hardened as he met Serena's gaze, his resolve firm despite the conflict in his heart. The bond between them had always been their guiding strength, but now it felt as though they were standing on the edge of an abyss, each path leading them further from the other. He knew that surrendering the Heartstone would not only mean relinquishing a critical part of their mission, but it could also embolden Soren and his crew, giving them control over something far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. Yet the idea of allowing more bloodshed, of putting the villagers at risk, gnawed at him. The safety of those who had trusted them should never be taken lightly, and the thought of facing them after a decision that might cost lives weighed heavily on his conscience. The decision they faced was one of unimaginable consequence, and neither of them knew how to make it without betraying something vital to their cause. Adrian's words hung in the air between them, an unspoken understanding passing through his gaze. His eyes, dark with determination, softened slightly as he stepped closer to Serena, the weight of their shared history reflected in his expression. He knew the stakes of their mission better than anyone. The Heartstone was not just a magical artifact, but a key to maintaining the delicate balance that kept their world from unraveling. They had fought, bled, and sacrificed so much to protect it, and to give it up now, especially under threat, felt like a betrayal to everything they had worked for. Yet, the thought of the villagers, their lives held in the balance, pulled at him with equal strength. Every choice felt like a tightrope walk, the consequences of each decision potentially irreparable. His heart was heavy, torn between the duty to safeguard the world and the responsibility to protect the innocent lives depending on them. Serena stood still, her chest tightening at the raw sincerity in Adrian's voice. The tension between them was palpable, as if the very air was charged with the weight of the decisions they were forced to make. She could see the internal battle in Adrian's eyes, the same struggle that had consumed her since the moment Soren's threat was revealed. She knew he was right. They had come too far to abandon their mission, and the Heartstone was a key piece of something far greater than themselves. Yet, the thought of the villagers, innocent and vulnerable, trapped in the crossfire, made her question whether their mission was worth more than the lives of those they had sworn to protect. It was a decision that no one should have to make, yet here they were, standing on the precipice of something that could change everything. The silence between them deepened, each lost in their own thoughts, both knowing that whatever decision they made, it would define the path forward. The door to the cabin burst open with an urgency that sent a jolt of tension through the air. A group of villagers spilled into the room, their hurried footsteps and anxious murmurs reverberating through the wooden walls. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperation. The sounds of their heavy breathing filled the space as they rushed to the center of the room, clearly seeking guidance. At the forefront of the group was Elara, the village leader, her usually composed demeanor now marred by the anxiety etched into her features. Her normally steady steps faltered as she approached Adrian and Serena, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together in front of her. The gravity of the situation was evident in her eyes, and her voice, when she spoke, carried the weight of the fears that had plagued the villagers for days. Elara's gaze flicked to the floor for a moment before meeting Adrian and Serena's eyes. "The message from Soren's crew," she began, her voice cracking slightly with the tension. "It's not just a threat anymore. They've begun to gather forces. We've seen their ships on the horizon, and they're preparing for something worse." Her words hung in the air, thick with the unspoken implication that the village was on the brink of an attack that would change everything. Serena's heart tightened at the sight of the villagers' unease, and she exchanged a glance with Adrian, silently acknowledging the burden of their choice. The decision they had been grappling with suddenly felt even more urgent. Time was running out, and their next move would determine not only the fate of the Heartstone but also the survival of the very people who had placed their trust in them. Elara's voice was steady, but the underlying desperation was impossible to ignore. She stepped forward, her posture rigid as if trying to maintain a semblance of control over the fear that threatened to overtake her. Her eyes darted to the map on the table, then back to Adrian and Serena, searching their faces for any sign of reassurance. "We've heard the threats," she continued, her tone laden with worry. "The men you faced earlier, Soren and his crew, they've made it clear that if we don't comply, the consequences will be far worse than we can imagine. The village, it's not prepared for a fight like that." Her gaze flickered toward the group of villagers still gathered behind her, each of them looking just as fragile, their hopes and fears hanging in the balance. "We don't want to be a burden on you," she added softly, the weight of the decision she was asking them to make settling heavily in the air. "If handing over the Heartstone will protect us, we're willing to accept that." Her words landed heavily in the room, each syllable carrying the collective anxiety of the villagers. Serena felt her chest tighten at the offer, at the realization that their mission, their fight for the Heartstone, was now tied to the safety of these people. The village, once a haven, had become a pawn in a dangerous game, and they were the ones caught in the middle. The stakes had never felt higher. Serena glanced at Adrian, silently pleading for a solution that would protect both the Heartstone and the villagers, but in her heart, she knew that the choice was no longer just about the artifact, it was about the lives of the innocent who had placed their trust in them. The room fell into a heavy silence as they waited for a response, the weight of the decision pressing down on them, knowing that whatever they chose would have consequences they couldn't undo. Adrian and Serena exchanged troubled glances, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on them both. The villagers' willingness to sacrifice their own safety for the greater good spoke volumes about their bravery and resilience. In the face of fear, they had chosen to trust the two of them with the Heartstone's fate, willing to endure further hardships if it meant sparing others from harm. It was a selfless act, one that mirrored the very qualities Adrian and Serena admired in those they had come to know during their travels. Yet, this same act of courage only made their decision that much more difficult. Their mission to protect the Heartstone, a relic of immense power, was tied to the safety of not just the villagers, but the balance of the world itself. To surrender it would mean abandoning their purpose, but to keep it would put the village in greater jeopardy. As they processed the weight of the villagers' offer, an overwhelming sense of conflict settled between them. They had always chosen the path of action, of fighting for what was right, but this felt different. The stakes were no longer just about personal gain or the pursuit of knowledge, it was about the lives of those who had placed their trust in them. Serena's heart ached at the thought of betraying that trust, but the thought of losing the Heartstone, a force that could tip the scales of power, was equally terrifying. She glanced at Adrian, whose expression mirrored her own uncertainty, both of them struggling to reconcile their duties as protectors with the needs of those they had sworn to defend. The future felt more uncertain than ever, and no matter what choice they made, it was clear that the consequences would ripple far beyond this small village. Serena's voice trembled slightly as she spoke, her words carrying a deep sense of gratitude and resolve. "We appreciate your bravery," she said softly, her gaze sweeping over the villagers who had gathered in the cabin, their faces etched with anxiety and hope. "But we can't let Soren and his crew win." The weight of the decision was still heavy on her heart, but there was a fire in her that refused to let them succumb to fear or threats. She could see the sacrifice in their eyes, the willingness to give up everything for the greater good, and it only strengthened her resolve. She couldn't let their bravery be in vain. There had to be a way to protect both the Heartstone and the village. They had already come too far, overcome too much, to surrender now. Adrian stood at her side, his presence a silent affirmation of the strength of their shared determination. Serena continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "We'll find a way to protect both the Heartstone and the village," she declared. The commitment in her tone left no room for doubt. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, and there would be sacrifices to make, but she refused to choose between the Heartstone and the people who had placed their trust in them. Their mission had always been about more than just the artifact, it had been about the balance they were working to restore. She was determined to uphold that promise, no matter the cost, and to face whatever came next with courage, as they always had. Adrian's expression was resolute as he nodded, his gaze unwavering. "We'll come up with a plan to safeguard the Heartstone and defend the village," he said, his voice steady but filled with determination. There was no hesitation in his words. He understood the stakes and the gravity of the situation. They couldn't afford to falter now. Adrian's mind raced with possibilities, weighing the risks and the resources they had at their disposal. He knew that facing Soren and his crew would require more than just strength and skill. They would need the support of the villagers to succeed. "But we need your support and cooperation to make it work," he added, his voice softening slightly as he looked to Alara and the villagers. Their courage and willingness to stand with them would be crucial in turning the tide. The villagers exchanged quiet looks among themselves, their concern evident but tempered by the trust they had placed in Adrian and Serena. Adrian could feel the weight of their gaze, a mixture of hope and fear. They had already shown their bravery by offering to sacrifice the Heartstone, but now they were being asked to take an active role in the defense of their home. He could see the resolve beginning to build in their faces, the desire to protect what they had left, and their commitment to standing together in the face of threat. Adrian knew that this wouldn't be easy, but with their help, there was a chance. Perhaps even a strong one, that they could outsmart Soren and his crew and protect both the village and the Heartstone. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would not face it alone. As the villagers and crew rallied together, Adrian and Serena took the lead, coordinating efforts with focused determination. They worked tirelessly to reinforce the village's defenses, setting up barriers and fortifying key points along the perimeter. Serena's sharp instincts guided the placement of traps, while Adrian, with his experience as a captain, oversaw the logistics of their defenses. They constructed makeshift barricades, stationed lookouts, and set up rudimentary warning systems using bells and tripwires. Every movement was purposeful, each decision made with the understanding that time was against them. While the village prepared for a possible attack, Serena and Adrian could feel the tension in the air, the sense that their lives were teetering on the edge of something both terrifying and inevitable. Despite the growing pressure, their bond remained a steadying force. Their loyalty to each other, forged through countless trials, was evident in every glance, every word. The mission was no longer just about exploring uncharted territories. It had become a fight for survival, a battle to protect not only the Heartstone but the people who had come to trust them. But with that responsibility came a heavy burden. As they worked side by side, it was clear to both of them that the stakes had never been higher. Every plan they made, every move they executed, carried the weight of their decisions, knowing that the lives of the villagers depended on the choices they made in the coming days. The task ahead felt almost insurmountable, but they pressed on, knowing that failure was not an option. That night, as they stood together on the deck of the Ariel, the vast ocean stretched out before them, a quiet contrast to the chaos they had just endured. The stars above flickered like distant beacons, their light shimmering on the water's surface. Adrian and Serena leaned against the railing, side by side, each lost in their thoughts as the soft wind carried the salty scent of the sea. It had been a long journey, filled with battles both external and internal. The trials they had faced, against Soren and his crew, the weight of the Heartstone, and the responsibility of protecting the villagers, had tested them in ways they had never anticipated. Yet, through it all, they had found strength in each other, drawing upon their unwavering bond to push forward. Their connection had been tested time and time again, but through every challenge, their commitment to one another had only grown stronger. The choices they had made, each one fraught with difficulty and uncertainty, had shaped them into the people they were now. The pressure of their mission, the lives at stake, and the threat of Soren's continued pursuit had cast shadows over their journey, but their loyalty to their shared goals remained unshaken. As they gazed at the stars, they knew that the road ahead would be just as difficult, if not more so. Yet, with each other by their side, they felt a quiet assurance that no matter what came next, they would face it together, their bond a guiding light in the darkness. Serena's voice was soft but filled with a quiet conviction as she spoke, her gaze fixed on the horizon, where the dark expanse of the ocean met the starry sky. "We've been through so much," she said, the weight of their journey settling between them like a shared secret. Each trial they had faced, the battles, the betrayals, the sacrifices, had tested them in ways they never imagined. But despite it all, they had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more connected than ever before. The challenges had shaped them, pushed them beyond their limits, and yet here they were, still standing, still united in their mission. The path ahead was uncertain, but she felt an unshakable belief that they could handle whatever came next, together. Her words hung in the air for a moment, a promise that anchored them both in the midst of the uncertainty. Adrian turned toward her, his expression mirroring her determination. "We'll face this one together," she continued, her voice steady with the resolve they had both cultivated over the course of their journey. "And we'll overcome it." There was no doubt in her heart, no hesitation. They had fought side by side through every storm, physical and emotional, and each time, they had emerged victorious. This new challenge, no matter how formidable, would be no different. With their unwavering bond and shared purpose, Serena knew they were more than capable of seeing it through. Together they would triumph, just as they always had. Adrian's hand rested firmly on Serena's shoulder, a gesture that conveyed both strength and support. His touch was grounding, a reminder that no matter the storm they faced, they would endure it together. His eyes met hers, filled with a quiet intensity that mirrored her own resolve. "We will," he said, his voice steady, the certainty in his tone leaving no room for doubt. They had both seen the depths of challenge and adversity, yet here they were, standing side by side, unbroken and unwavering. The trials they had faced had only served to fortify their bond, and Adrian knew that it would carry them through whatever dangers lay ahead. His words hung between them, a promise they had made to one another long ago, to always stand together, no matter the cost. "No matter what comes our way, we'll face it head on," Adrian continued, his grip on her shoulder tightening ever so slightly as if to reinforce his commitment. "Our loyalty to each other and to our mission will guide us through." In that moment, they both knew that they were no longer simply partners in a shared cause. They were a force to be reckoned with, bound by an unbreakable trust and a shared purpose. With their bond as their anchor, there was no challenge too great, no enemy too powerful. They were ready for whatever came next, their resolve stronger than ever before. As the night deepened around them, a quiet sense of purpose settled over Adrian and Serena. The stars above, distant yet constant, seemed to echo the steadfastness they felt within. They moved together with synchronized precision, preparing for the challenges that awaited them. Every decision, every hardship they had faced up to this point had brought them to this moment, a pivotal point in their journey where uncertainty still loomed, but their resolve was unshakable. The weight of their experiences had forged a stronger bond between them, one that could withstand the pressures of the trials still to come. They knew that ahead, dangers would test not just their physical strength, but the very core of their resolve. Their loyalty to each other, tested by difficult choices and the unknown paths they had walked, remained their greatest strength. In the face of relentless adversity, they had learned to rely on each other more than ever. With each decision they made, the stakes grew higher, and yet, they knew they were not alone. The trust between them had been solidified through countless battles and shared moments of vulnerability. They had weathered storms together, and now, as they faced the next leg of their journey, they were more than ready. No matter what challenges lay ahead, their unity was their greatest asset, and together, they would face them all with unwavering strength and determination. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, bathing the world in a soft, golden glow that signaled not just the start of a new day, but the beginning of a renewed sense of purpose. The quiet beauty of the morning was a stark contrast to the trials they had endured, yet it filled Adrian and Serena with an inner strength. United by their shared mission, they stood side by side, resolute in their commitment to protect not only the Heartstone but the world they had sworn to defend. The darkness of the previous night had passed, leaving behind a sharpened focus and a sense of clarity that guided their every step. The trials they had faced had tested their loyalty in ways they had never imagined, yet the struggles had only deepened their bond. Their connection, forged through adversity, was stronger than ever before. As they prepared for the challenges ahead, their determination was unwavering. No longer weighed down by doubt, they were ready to face their adversaries with the same courage that had seen them through every battle. Together, they would confront whatever dangers awaited, knowing that their unity and resolve were the greatest weapons they possessed. Chapter 46: The Ultimate Challenge. Dawn crept over the coastal village, its pale lights spilling across the rooftops and casting long shadows on the bustling scene below. Every corner of the settlement was alive with purposeful activity as Adrian and Serena worked tirelessly alongside their crew and the villagers. The preparations for the impending conflict were in full swing, with defensive structures being fortified and weapons distributed among those willing to stand and fight. The tension was thick, a silent thread binding everyone together as they anticipated the coming storm. Though the Heartstone was safely concealed, its presence loomed over them, a symbol of both hope and danger. Their enemies were relentless, and whispers of the dark forces aligned with Soren's crew only deepened the unease. Adrian and Serena moved among the villagers, offering guidance and reassurance despite the growing pressure. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on their shoulders, but their resolve remained unshaken. They knew the battle ahead would be unlike any they had faced before, the stakes higher and the adversaries more ruthless. Yet, even in the face of such daunting odds, the determination in their eyes never wavered. This village, these people, they were worth fighting for. And though the rising sun marked the beginning of what could be their greatest challenge yet, it also served as a reminder of the light they sought to protect, no matter how fierce the shadows became. The village had transformed into a fortified bastion of resilience, with makeshift barricades lining the streets and defensive positions manned by vigilant villagers and crew members alike. The once serene coastal settlement now bristled with tension, every corner a testament to their collective determination to stand their ground. Adrian and Serena stood side by side at the edge of the perimeter, their eyes fixed on the distant horizon, where the first signs of dawn met the shadowy expanse of the sea. The air was thick with anticipation, each gust of wind carrying the unspoken question of when the enemy would strike. Every creak of wood and distant rustle felt like a harbinger of the inevitable clash to come. The memory of Soren's threat hung heavily between them, a grim reminder that their adversaries were ruthless and unyielding. "They'll come," Adrian murmured, his voice edged with a mixture of resolve and apprehension. Serena nodded, her gaze unwavering. She could feel the weight of the Heartstone's significance pressing down on them, its power both a blessing and a curse. Yet, even amidst the looming danger, there was a quiet strength in their unity, a shared understanding that they would defend not just the artifact, but the people who had placed their trust in them. Whatever the cost, they were determined to meet the challenge head-on, their bonds serving as an anchor in the storm that threatened to engulf them all. As the sun ascended, its rays casting a golden sheen over the fortified village, a faint but growing cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. The sight sent a ripple of unease through the defenders, a tangible reminder that the promised confrontation was drawing near. Adrian's grip on the hilt of his sword tightened, the polished steel catching the light as he prepared for the inevitable clash. Each heartbeat felt heavier than the last as he surveyed the approaching forces, the shapes of Soren's crew slowly coming into focus. This was not just another skirmish, or a routine battle. This confrontation carried the weight of everything they had fought for. Victory here would mean preserving the fragile peace they had worked to protect, while failure would plunge them and the village into chaos. Beside him, Serena steadied herself, her silver hair catching the sunlight like a beacon of resolve. Though far from the sea, her connection to it remained strong, her abilities a silent promise of strength should the battle require them. Her fingers traced the edge of her staff, ready to summon the powers granted by her mermaid heritage. Despite the countless battles they had faced, this one felt uniquely perilous, a defining moment not just for their mission, but for the bond that had been forged in the crucible of their shared trials. The air between them was thick with unspoken determination, their gazes meeting briefly in a silent vow, no matter the odds, they would face this danger together. The first wave of Soren's crew broke through the haze of dust, their figures looming like harbingers of chaos. Their faces, hardened and relentless, bore the marks of men who lived by violence and conquest. Yet they were not alone. Surrounding them were dark, twisted creatures, their forms shifting as if made of living shadow. These beings moved with an eerie autonomy, their presence radiating an unnatural malice that sent chills through the defenders. The air seemed to thicken with dread as these abominations advanced, their very existence a manifestation of the dark forces Soren had aligned with. Despite the grim sight, Adrian and Serena stood firm, their resolve a steadying force for those around them. Adrian's sword gleamed as he raised it, his voice cutting through the tension as he called out commands to the defenders. Serena, her silver hair glowing like a beacon against the encroaching darkness, steadied her staff, ready to unleash her mermaid abilities. They knew the odds were stacked against them, but retreat was not an option. Together, they embodied the strength and unity that had carried them through countless trials, their unwavering determination igniting a spark of courage in the hearts of those who fought alongside them. "Everyone, to your positions!" Adrian's voice cut through the growing tension, resonating with unwavering authority. The defenders scrambled into action, rallying behind his command. Villagers armed with spears and bows took their places behind barricades, their faces set with determination despite the fear lingering in their eyes. The crew of the Ariel moved swiftly to reinforce weak points in the fortifications, their practiced efficiency a testament to their loyalty and trust in Adrian's leadership. The air was thick with the sound of hurried movements, and the collective resolve of those willing to fight for their home. Adrian stood tall at the center of the defensive line, his presence a steadfast anchor for the men and women who depended on him. Beside him, Serena's gaze swept over the village, her mind sharp and calculating as she assessed their chances. "We hold the line here," she said firmly, her voice low but resolute. Her hands hovered over the enchanted staff she carried, its faint glow a sign of the ocean's power coursing through her. "If they break through, the village doesn't stand a chance." The distant rumble of Soren's forces grew louder, and the defenders braced themselves, every heart beating with anticipation. Adrian cast a quick glance at Serena, their unspoken bond reaffirming their shared purpose. "We won't let them breach our defenses," he said, his tone steady despite the storm looming ahead. Together, they prepared to face the onslaught, their united strength the village's last hope. The clash began with a deafening roar, shattering the tense silence that had settled over the fortified village. Soren's crew surged forward in a chaotic wave, their weapons catching the sunlight with a menacing glint. Their battle cries mingled with the guttural snarls of the shadow creatures that flanked them, their glowing eyes pulsing with an otherworldly malice. The defenders braced themselves, their determination unyielding as they met the assault head-on. Arrows flew from the villagers' makeshift bows, finding their marks in the first wave of attackers, while Adrian and his crew engaged in brutal close combat at the front lines. The shadow creatures moved with unnatural speed and precision, slithering through gaps in the defenses and forcing the defenders to fight on multiple fronts. The battle quickly devolved into a grueling melee. The defenders fought with unwavering valor, their shouts of defiance rising above the chaos, but the enemy's strength and sheer numbers began to take their toll. Villagers and crew members alike found themselves pushed to their limits, every strike of their weapons an act of desperation and resolve. Serena stood at the heart of the fray, wielding her oceanic magic with precision, her staff glowing brightly as waves of energy repelled the advancing shadows. Each spell drained her strength, yet she remained steadfast, knowing the stakes were too high to falter. Meanwhile, Adrian's sword danced in lethal arcs, cutting down foes with a skill born of countless battles, his commands rallying those who began to waver. Though the defenders held their ground, the relentless assault made it clear, this would be a fight not just of strength, but of will. Serena moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly, her every gesture summoning the power of the sea to her aid. With a sweep of her hand, torrents of water erupted from the ground, surging toward the shadow creatures and throwing them into disarray. Her silver hair glinted in the sunlight as she wove her magic, her focus unshakable despite the chaos around her. Each wave she conjured was a barrier between the villagers and the encroaching darkness, a testament to her determination to protect the innocent. Beside her, Adrian was a force of raw precision, his sword flashing with deadly intent as he carved through the enemy ranks. His strikes were swift and efficient, his every move calculated to minimize risk while maximizing impact. Together they moved like two parts of a single entity, their actions perfectly synchronized as though guided by an unspoken understanding. Serena's magic created openings, and Adrian capitalized on them, cutting down foes before they could regroup. Their synergy was a product of countless battles fought side by side, a bond forged through trust and shared purpose. The battlefield around them was a cacophony of screams and clashing steel, but within their shared space, there was an unyielding sense of unity. In that moment, their connection was a beacon of hope for the defenders, a reminder that even against overwhelming odds, strength born of loyalty and determination could turn the tide. Despite their relentless efforts, the battle began to tilt in favor of their enemies. Soren emerged from the chaos, a dark and commanding figure at the forefront of his forces. In his grasp was a sinister artifact, its jagged edges pulsating with an ominous energy that seemed to poison the very air around it. Waves of malevolent power radiated outward, invigorating the shadowy creatures under his control while sapping the strength of the defenders. Each motion of the artifact sent shivers through the ranks of villagers and crew, the oppressive energy weighing down their resolve. Soren's voice, deep and resonant, carried across the battlefield, directing his forces with chilling precision, his presence turning the tide of the battle into a desperate struggle. Adrian and Serena exchanged a grim glance as they recognized the shift in momentum. The defenders, inspired by their earlier confidence, now faltered under the weight of Soren's power. Panic began to spread like wildfire as the dark creatures pressed their advantage, their movements emboldened by Soren's artifact. Serena gritted her teeth, her magic faltering momentarily under the oppressive force radiating from the artifact. Adrian's grip on his sword tightened, his mind racing for a strategy to counter Soren's overwhelming influence. The bond they had forged and the trust they shared remained steadfast, but the scale of Soren's power was undeniable, casting a shadow over their hopes of victory. Yet, even in the face of despair, they stood firm, refusing to yield to the fear that threatened to consume them. "We need to take him down!" Serena shouted, her voice rising above the chaotic clash of weapons and the eerie howls of the dark creatures. Her silver hair, damp with sweat and sea mist, clung to her face as she gestured towards Soren at the center of the enemy forces. "He's controlling the dark forces," she added, her tone urgent. Her keen eyes were locked on the artifact in his hand, its malevolent glow pulsating in rhythm with the ebb and flow of the battle. The defenders' resistance was crumbling under the weight of Soren's power, and Serena knew that as long as he commanded the battlefield, they stood little chance of turning the tide. Adrian nodded, his expression fierce and resolute. "Then we'll stop him together," he replied, gripping his sword tightly. He glanced at Serena, their shared determination igniting a spark of hope amidst the despair. They pushed forward through the fray, weaving between the defenders and the surging shadows. Adrian's blade cut through the chaos with precision, while Serena summoned her powers to conjure bursts of seawater, scattering the dark creatures that obstructed their path. Each step brought them closer to Soren, but his presence was suffocating, the artifact's dark energy battering against their spirits. Despite the mounting pressure, they pressed on, driven by their unyielding loyalty to each other and the lives they sought to protect. Adrian nodded, his jaw set with determination. "We'll need to get past those creatures to reach him," he said, his voice firm despite the chaos surrounding them. His gaze swept over the battlefield, assessing the writhing mass of dark creatures that stood between them and Soren. Their movements were erratic yet purposeful, as if driven by the sinister energy of the artifact in Soren's hand. Adrian tightened his grip on his sword, its blade gleaming even amid the shadowy haze. "Let's push through," he commanded, glancing at Serena with a look of unshakable resolve. Serena responded with a sharp nod, summoning her powers with a flick of her wrist. Waves surged from her outstretched hands, crashing into the dark creatures and momentarily disrupting their advance. Together, they charged forward, carving a path through the battlefield with synchronized precision. Adrian's sword cut through the creatures with swift, powerful strikes, while Serena's water currents battered them back, creating openings for the defenders to regroup. The path to Soren was fraught with peril, but their unwavering determination fueled every step. Each glance they exchanged reminded them of their shared mission, their bond strengthening their resolve to overcome the dark tide and reach the source of the chaos. Adrian and Serena pressed forward, their movements synchronized in perfect rhythm as they cut through the ranks of dark creatures that blocked their path. The clash of steel and the howl of the creatures filled the air, but their focus never wavered. With every strike of Adrian's sword, another creature fell, its shadowy form dissipating into nothingness. Serena's power surged in waves, the force of the sea pushing back the twisted entities with relentless determination. The battlefield seemed endless, but their drive to reach Soren fueled every movement, each step forward gained through sheer will, blood, and sweat. The weight of the moment was heavy, but their commitment to each other and the cause kept them moving forward. Around them, the battle raged on, with their allies holding the line with fierce resolve. The villagers, once fearful and uncertain, now fought like warriors, defending their home and their future. The crew of the Ariel fought with equal grit, working as a unit to stave off the enemy's advances and create openings for Adrian and Serena to press forward. Each ally's sacrifice, each blow struck in their defense, bought them precious moments. Their unity became a force of its own, allowing Adrian and Serena to carve their way toward Soren, despite the overwhelming odds. Every step was fraught with danger, but they were driven by the knowledge that they had to succeed, for the village and for the Heartstone. As Adrian and Serena finally reached Soren, the air around him seemed to hum with malevolent energy. The dark artifact in his hand pulsed ominously, casting an eerie glow that reflected off his twisted grin. He stood tall, his posture exuding arrogance, as if the battle was already won. The sight of him, so sure of his power, made the air feel heavier, and the shadows seemed to writhe and move in response to his presence. Serena's grip tightened on her weapon, her heart pounding in her chest as Soren's cold fury radiated from him like a palpable force. His eyes locked onto theirs, the contempt in his gaze clear. He didn't fear them. In fact, he seemed to relish the impending confrontation, as if he were savoring the moment before his ultimate victory. "You think you can stop me?" Soren's voice was low and mocking, filled with dark confidence. His words slithered through the tension-filled air, laced with menace. "You're too late," he continued, a cruel smile tugging at his lips. "The Heartstone is mine, and with it, I'll bring this world to its knees." The artifact in his hand glowed brighter, its power thrumming as if eager to be unleashed. It was clear that the power he wielded was immense, and with every passing second, the stakes grew higher. Serena's pulse quickened, and Adrian's expression hardened with determination. They had fought through so much to get here, but facing Soren now, so close to his ultimate goal, would be the ultimate test of their strength, resolve, and the bond that had carried them this far. "We won't let that happen!" Adrian's voice rang out with fierce determination, his words cutting through the tension like a blade. Without hesitation, he charged forward, his sword raised high, eyes locked onto Soren with unwavering resolve. The dark forces surrounding them recoiled as his presence surged toward their leader, but Soren only laughed, his smug expression never faltering. The pulsing energy of the artifact grew stronger, its dark light flickering like a beacon of doom, but Adrian pressed on, his every step filled with purpose. His focus was unshakable, knowing that the fate of the village, the Heartstone, and the world they fought to protect rested on the battle that was about to unfold. Serena followed closely behind him, her movements swift and fluid as she called upon the sea's power to clear a path through the dark creatures that threatened to block their advance. With each wave of energy she summoned, the creatures faltered, their forms dissolving into mist or being swept aside by powerful currents. Despite the chaos around them, Adrian and Serena moved as one, their synchronization evident in every step, every strike. As they drew closer to Soren, the oppressive weight of the dark artifact intensified, but their bond, forged through countless trials, remained their greatest strength. Together, they would face this final challenge, and with every ounce of their energy, they refused to let Soren's twisted ambitions succeed. The duel between Adrian and Soren was a whirlwind of chaos, the clash of steel against dark magic echoing through the battlefield. Soren's eyes gleamed with malevolent glee as he swung his dark artifact, sending waves of energy crashing toward Adrian. The force of each blast sent tremors through the ground, and Adrian had to move with lightning speed to evade them. His sword, sharp and steady, cut through the air with precision, meeting Soren's dark powers in a brilliant flash of light. Each strike was an effort to break through Soren's defenses, but the dark magic held its ground, each collision reverberating with the strength of the opposing forces. Soren's taunts filled the air, but Adrian's focus remained unshakable. He would not let this evil take hold. Serena, standing by Adrian's side, was a force in her own right. Her mermaid abilities surged through her, as she summoned the power of the sea to protect them. With a sweeping motion, she created a protective barrier of shimmering water, its surface rippling with energy as it deflected the dark creatures and blasts that came their way. The barrier was a shield of resolve, holding back the onslaught and buying them precious moments. Serena's eyes never left Adrian, and with each surge of power, her magic pushed against the dark forces, maintaining their defense as Adrian fought with relentless determination. Together, they formed an unbreakable bond, their combined strengths cutting through the darkness as they faced Soren with unwavering resolve. The battle reached its boiling point as Adrian and Soren locked in a fierce, life-and-death struggle. Soren's dark magic lashed out in waves, each one stronger than the last, pushing Adrian to his limits. The air crackled with the force of Soren's attacks, the ground beneath them cracking as if reacting to the sheer power of the dark energy being unleashed. Adrian's sword flashed, his movements swift and precise, a dance of steel against shadow. He dodged and parried, his every strike a testament to the years of experience that had sharpened his skills. With each clash of their weapons, the intensity of their struggle seemed to grow, both combatants pushing forward with everything they had. But it was clear, Adrian's resolve was unwavering, and his determination burned brighter than the dark magic that sought to consume him. With a final, earth-shattering strike, Adrian saw his opening. Soren's guard faltered just for a moment, a crack in his otherwise indomitable defense. Seizing the opportunity, Adrian lunged forward with incredible speed, his sword piercing the air in a single, powerful arc. The impact was forceful, and Soren's grip on his dark artifact faltered. The artifact slipped from his hand, tumbling through the air before crashing to the ground with a deafening thud. For a moment there was silence, a breathless stillness as the weight of the battle shifted in Adrian's favor. The dark magic that had plagued the battlefield seemed to waver, its hold weakening as Soren stumbled back in disbelief, his power suddenly without its source. The moment Soren's defeat became evident, the dark forces faltered. The once unyielding front they had maintained cracked, as if the lifeblood of their strength had been drained with their leader's fall. The creatures, previously so relentless in their attacks, hesitated, their movements becoming erratic and disjointed. Whispers of fear spread among them, the overwhelming presence of Soren now gone. For a brief, tense moment, they stood frozen, as if unsure of what to do without the dark energy that had driven them. Then, one by one, they began to retreat, abandoning the battlefield in disarray. The once imposing army crumbled, their dark purpose shattered, leaving only the echoes of their chaotic retreat. As the remaining enemies fled, the defenders rallied. Their spirits lifted by the sight of their victory, they pushed forward with renewed vigor, their determination outweighing their exhaustion. Though bloodied and battered, Adrian, Serena, and their allies fought with unwavering resolve, their every movement bringing them closer to securing the village's safety. The once thrashing tide of the battle was now in their favor, and they pressed the remaining attackers back, forcing them toward the edges of the battlefield. The defenders' courage and unity prevailed, and the air shifted from the tension of battle to the bittersweet relief of victory. The enemy's numbers dwindled as they retreated into the shadows, leaving the defenders standing tall, though exhausted, knowing they had triumphed against insurmountable odds. As the last remnants of dust settled over the battlefield, Adrian and Serena stood side by side, their bodies battered and weary but their spirits unbroken. The village, once on the brink of destruction, was now safe. The Heartstone remained hidden, its power secure for the moment, and the dark forces that had threatened them were gone. Adrian's breath came in heavy gasps as he wiped the blood from his brow, his sword still gripped firmly in his hand. Serena, though equally exhausted, stood tall, her silver hair damp and wild, the aura of the sea still lingering in the air around her. Together, they surveyed the aftermath, wounded but triumphant, the quiet following the storm almost surreal after the chaos they had just endured. Around them, the defenders erupted into cheers, their voices ringing through the air as they embraced one another, tears mingling with dirt and sweat. They had fought with everything they had, and now, as the reality of their victory began to sink in, the weight of their exhaustion lifted slightly. The once tense atmosphere was now filled with a palpable sense of relief, the air lighter as the threat that had loomed over them for so long was finally eradicated. For the villagers, this victory was not just one of survival, but a testament to their courage and resilience. Adrian and Serena exchanged a quiet glance, their eyes saying what words could not. They had fought not only for the Heartstone, but for the people who had trusted them, and now, they could finally allow themselves a moment to breathe. Alara walked toward Adrian and Serena, her steps slow but steady, her face reflecting both the weariness of the battle and the deep gratitude that radiated from her. Her eyes met theirs, shining with appreciation as she took in the sight of the two heroes who had fought tirelessly for her people. "You've done it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "The village is safe, and the heart stone remained secure. The weight of her words hung in the air as she paused, struggling to find the right words to truly capture the depth of her gratitude. The villagers, now gathering around them, were a testament to the victory they had secured, their relief evident in every tear-streaked face and weary smile. "You've given us more than we could ever express," Elara continued, her voice softening as she took a step closer, her hands clasped in front of her. Her gratitude was sincere, her respect for Adrian and Serena unwavering. "Without you, we would have been lost. You've not only protected the Heartstone, but you've given us a future." The weight of their sacrifice and dedication to the village was clear in her gaze. Adrian and Serena, still covered in the grime and blood of battle, exchanged a glance, their bond stronger than ever. Despite the immense challenges they had faced, it was the gratitude in Elara's eyes, and the quiet smiles of the villagers around them, that reminded them of the true worth of their struggle. Adrian and Serena shared a tired but satisfied smile, the weight of the battle slowly lifting from their shoulders as they looked around at the villagers who had fought beside them. Their faces, though weary, radiated a sense of shared victory. Adrian's expression softened, the tension of the battle giving way to a quiet, proud relief. Serena, her voice warm yet weary, addressed the gathered villagers. "We couldn't have done it without the support of everyone here," she said, her words genuine and full of gratitude. She took a moment to meet the eyes of those who had risked so much alongside them. The unity they had forged in the heat of battle was undeniable, and it was this unity that had brought them to victory. "Thank you for standing with us," Serena continued, her gaze sweeping over the group. The simple act of their cooperation had turned the tide, and Serena understood that without their courage and resolve, even the strongest bonds and strategies would have been futile. Adrian nodded in agreement, his own exhaustion tempered by the overwhelming sense of accomplishment. Together, they had faced the darkest of forces and emerged victorious, but it was the collective strength of the villagers and their unwavering support that had truly made the difference. In that moment, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, Adrian and Serena knew that their mission had not only been about protecting the Heartstone but also about the bonds they had forged, bonds that would carry them through whatever came next. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the battlefield in hues of amber and crimson, Adrian and Serena stood side by side, gazing over the aftermath of their hard-fought victory. The once chaotic scene was now eerily quiet, the weight of what they had endured settling over them. Broken weapons and abandoned remnants of Soren's forces lay scattered among the fortifications, silent reminders of the fierce battle they had survived. In that moment, Adrian and Serena felt the enormity of their triumph. They had faced an enemy of unrelenting darkness, risking everything for the Heartstone, the village, and the fragile balance they had vowed to protect. The bond between them, forged through trust and shared purpose, had not only survived but strengthened under the pressure of their ultimate test. Their loyalty, to each other, to their mission, and to the villagers, had been challenged in ways they never imagined, but it had carried them through the crucible of battle. As the first stars began to prick the darkening sky, Serena reached out, her hand brushing Adrian's arm, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. Adrian nodded, his gaze steady as it swept over the village now safe behind its battered defenses. This victory was not just theirs. It was a testament to the courage of all who had stood beside them. The challenges they had faced, though harrowing, had proven the strength of their resolve and the enduring power of unity. Together, they turned away from the battlefield, ready to face whatever new trials lay ahead, their spirits bolstered by the knowledge that even the darkest forces could not break the bonds they had forged. The battle had tested them in every conceivable way, pushing their endurance and resolve to the limit. Each swing of Adrian's sword and every surge of Serena's oceanic power had been driven by their unwavering belief in their cause, and in each other. Though the fight had been grueling and the stakes unimaginably high, it had also served to deepen the connection between them. They had moved as one, their actions guided by an unspoken understanding that only grew stronger with each passing moment. Their loyalty and trust in one another were no longer just shared ideals. They had become an unshakable foundation, forged in the crucible of battle. As they stood together in the quiet aftermath, the weight of their victory settled over them like a solemn vow. The hardships they had endured had only solidified their commitment to protecting what they held dear. Adrian's steadfast determination and Serena's boundless courage had proven to be the perfect balance, a partnership that could weather even the fiercest storms. In the lingering silence, surrounded by the remnants of conflict, they knew that their bond had become something far greater than the challenges they had faced. It was their greatest strength, and it would carry them forward into whatever lay ahead. With the village finally safe and the immediate danger behind them, Adrian and Serena stood together in the fading light, letting the weight of their journey settle around them. The battles they had fought had been grueling, each victory hard won and steeped in sacrifice. Yet, through every challenge, their courage and unity had proven unbreakable. They thought back on the trials that had tested their resolve, from the relentless attacks of Soren's forces to the dark magic that threatened to consume everything they cherished. Despite it all, they had stood firm, drawing strength not only from their shared purpose but from the bond they had forged along the way. As they prepared to take their next steps, they knew their journey was far from over. The Heart Stone remained a symbol of hope and responsibility, and its protection would continue to demand vigilance and sacrifice. However, they no longer faced the unknown with trepidation. Together they had overcome what once seemed insurmountable, and that knowledge filled them with a quiet determination. Whatever new challenges awaited them on the horizon, they would face them side by side, fortified by the lessons of the past and the promise of a future they were ready to shape together. The night sky stretched above them, a sprawling expanse of stars glittering like distant beacons of possibility. The cool breeze carried the scent of the sea, mingling with the quiet hum of the village, settling into an uneasy peace. Adrian and Serena stood side by side, their gazes fixed on the horizon where the heavens met the ocean, their silhouettes illuminated by the faint glow of the moonlight. Each star seemed to whisper a promise of new beginnings, a reminder of the vastness of the world beyond their trials. The battles they had fought and the sacrifices they had made had left scars, but those scars told a story of resilience and triumph. Together they felt an unspoken connection, a shared understanding of all they had endured and all they had yet to discover. In their hearts, hope flickered like the starlight above, steady and unwavering. The challenges of their journey had forged them into a stronger, more unified force, prepared to face whatever lay ahead. As they stood there, the weight of the past gave way to the anticipation of what was to come. Each breath they took was filled with the resolve to protect what they had fought so hard to preserve and the determination to embrace the adventures that awaited them. For Adrian and Serena, the night was not just an ending but a beginning, a canvas of endless horizons painted with the promise of new dreams, new challenges, and new victories to claim together.